I remember watching a mother in a supermarket once, calm one second, completely shaken the next. Her son couldn't have been more than 8. Something small happened, a no, I think. And just like that, it was as if a switch flipped. His voice got louder, his face tightened. Then, bang, something hit the floor. People turned. You know that kind of silence, the uncomfortable one, where everyone pretends not to stare but absolutely is. And there she stood, frozen. Not because she didn't know what to do, but because in that moment, nothing she had ever tried seemed like it would work. Now here's the part most people won't admit out loud. It's not just embarrassing, it's not just exhausting, it's scary. Because somewhere in your mind, a question starts forming, quietly, but persistently. Is this just a phase, or is something actually wrong? Over the years, I've seen this exact moment play out in different forms: homes, schools, quiet living rooms where voices suddenly aren't so quiet anymore, and what most people label as bad behavior often isn't that simple. Because when a child becomes aggressive, they're not just acting out, they're saying something. The problem is, most of us were never taught how to understand what that something is. Let me say something that usually makes parents pause for a second. Aggression is not a personality trait. It's not a permanent flaw. And most times, it's not even intentional. It's communication. Crude, loud, uncomfortable communication, but communication nonetheless. You see, children, especially younger ones, don't naturally come equipped with a full emotional vocabulary. They don't sit there thinking, I'm feeling overwhelmed due to a lack of control in my environment. No. What they feel is pressure, and what comes out is noise. Sometimes that noise looks like yelling, sometimes it looks like slamming doors, and sometimes it looks like hitting, throwing, or saying things that make you stop in your tracks. Now here's where it gets interesting. A child who hits when they're told no isn't just being defiant. More often than not, they're experiencing frustration without regulation. There's a gap between what they feel and what they know how to do with that feeling. Imagine having a surge of anger, confusion, or disappointment, and no internal system to process it, no pause button, no filter, no alternative response. That's where aggression lives. And then there's modeling. Children are sharp observers. They may not always listen, but they are always watching. The tone you use when you're stressed, how conflict is handled around them, even the way people express irritation, these things get absorbed quietly, then replayed later. Not perfectly, but powerfully. So when a child lashes out, sometimes what you're seeing is not just their emotion, but a reflection of what they've learned emotion is supposed to look like. Now, this doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It just means behavior doesn't exist in isolation. I've seen teenagers who don't raise their hands or throw things, but their aggression shows up differently. Silence, sharp responses, that heavy door slam that somehow says more than words ever could. Same root, different expression. And here's the shift most parents need to make. This is where things begin to change. Instead of asking, how do I stop this behavior? You start asking, what is this behavior trying to tell me? Because once you understand the message, you're no longer reacting blindly. You're responding with direction. Here's the part that catches a lot of people off guard. Aggressive behavior rarely starts in the moment you see it. It builds. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. Then one small thing happens, and suddenly it looks like everything exploded over nothing. But it's never nothing. I like to think of it as a stress bucket. Every child carries one around, and throughout the day it gets filled, little by little. A poor night's sleep? That's one scoop. Skipping a proper meal or too much sugar? Another scoop. A difficult assignment at school? Add more. Feeling ignored when they tried to talk to you earlier? That one weighs more than most parents realize. Now here's the problem. No one sees the bucket filling up. All anyone sees is the overflow. That moment when you say something simple, turn that off, or not now. And suddenly the reaction feels completely out of proportion. The yelling, the snapping, the physical outburst. And you're left wondering, Where did that even come from? It came from accumulation. I once watched a situation where a child had what looked like a full meltdown over being told to take a shower. On the surface, it looked ridiculous. But if you traced the day backwards, it told a completely different story. There was a test they didn't feel confident about, a friend who ignored them at lunch, a teacher who corrected them in front of the class, and then they came home, hoping quietly for a little ease. Instead, they got instructions, perfectly normal instructions, but to a full bucket. It felt like pressure, and pressure needs somewhere to go. Now let's talk about something even more subtle, feeling unheard. You'd be surprised how often aggression shows up not because a child wasn't disciplined, but because they felt dismissed. Maybe they tried to explain something earlier and were brushed off. Maybe their emotions were minimized. It's not a big deal. You're overreacting. Just leave it. To an adult, that sounds reasonable. To a child, it can feel like being shut down. And when someone feels unheard long enough, they don't stop expressing themselves. They just change how they do it. Quieter attempts turn into louder ones. And then there's inconsistency. One day, a behavior is ignored. The next day, it's punished harshly. Another day, it's laughed off. That unpredictability creates confusion, and confusion creates anxiety. And anxiety, especially in younger minds, often comes out sideways, as irritation, defiance, or straight-up aggression. So what looks like random outbursts is often a pattern hiding in plain sight. Once you start noticing the triggers, the sleep, the environment, the emotional build-up, the subtle dismissals, you realize something important. These reactions aren't as unpredictable as they seem. They're patterned. And once you can see the pattern, you're no longer reacting to chaos. You're reading a system. Now this is where things usually take a turn, and not in the direction most parents hope for. Because in that heated moment, when the voice gets louder, the attitude sharpens, or something gets thrown, your instinct kicks in. You react. Sometimes it's immediate. Stop that right now. What is wrong with you? Go to your room. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, you say nothing at all. You ignore it, hoping it will pass, or because you're simply too drained to engage. Both reactions are common. Both feel justified. And both, more often than not, make things worse. Let's start with escalation. When a child is already overwhelmed, their nervous system is in overdrive. Heart rate up, emotions flooding, logic nowhere to be found. Now, if you meet that intensity with more intensity, raising your voice, showing visible frustration, you're not calming the situation. You're matching it. And when two people are escalating at the same time, it stops being correction and starts becoming a power struggle. At that point, it's no longer about the original issue. It becomes about control. Who wins? Who backs down? And children, especially as they grow older, don't respond well to feeling overpowered, so they push back harder. Now let's look at the quieter mistake, emotional dismissal. Sometimes a parent skips straight to discipline without acknowledging what led to the behavior. The focus becomes, that action was wrong, without addressing the emotion behind it. And yes, the action does need correction, no question. But when the emotion is ignored, the message the child receives is simple. What I feel doesn't matter, only how I behave does. So what happens next time? They don't feel less, they just express it louder. Then there's inconsistency again, but this time in reactions. One day you're patient, the next day you're overwhelmed. Another day you snap quicker than usual. It's human, of course, but to a child it creates an unstable system. They don't know which version of you they're going to get. So instead of feeling guided, they feel on edge. Now here's a concept that changes everything once you understand it. Co-regulation. Before children learn to regulate themselves, they borrow regulation from you. Your tone, your posture, your response speed, even your facial expression. If you're calm, slow and steady, even when they're not, you're giving their system something to mirror. If you're reactive, sharp and unpredictable, they mirror that too. I've seen two nearly identical situations play out very differently. In one, the parent reacts instantly, voice raised, commands flying. The child pushes back, louder, more defiant. It spirals. In the other, the parent pauses, lowers their voice, doesn't rush to dominate the moment. There's still firmness, but it's controlled. The child resists at first, then gradually settles. Same behavior, different outcome. And here's the hard truth. Discipline without connection doesn't teach. It suppresses, temporarily. But what's underneath? That stays. And eventually, it comes back, usually louder than before. Now that we understand why so many reactions backfire, let's get to the part that actually helps. Strategies that work in real life, not just theory. First and foremost, acknowledge the emotion. I know, it sounds simple. Oh, they're frustrated, you think. But saying it aloud, I see you're really angry right now, does something powerful. It tells the child their feelings are valid, and when feelings are validated, the need to act out physically or verbally often decreases. Think of it as emotional triage. Before you treat the behavior, you stabilize the emotion. Next, create pause moments. When the meltdown starts, resist reacting immediately. Give them, and yourself, space to breathe. Even a minute of calm can reset the nervous system. Sometimes it's as simple as a quiet corner, a sensory tool like a stress ball or a short walk. It's not ignoring them, it's teaching them self-regulation through your modeled calm. Then, set clear and consistent boundaries. Aggression without limits is a free-for-all. But limits aren't just rules, they're expectations paired with guidance. For example, it's okay to feel angry, but hitting is not okay. You can stomp your feet, not hurt anyone. This introduces the concept of replacement behaviors, giving them an acceptable way to express the same emotion. Structure matters too. Kids respond well to predictability. Regular routines, clear instructions, and consistent responses reduce uncertainty, which is often a hidden trigger for aggression. Even teens benefit from some structure. It reduces decision fatigue and frustration. Now, let's talk about teaching problem-solving skills. Children, especially preteens and teens, often lash out because they feel stuck. Showing them step-by-step ways to handle challenges, taking deep breaths, counting to 10, or discussing the problem builds long-term resilience. They start to learn, I can feel upset without hurting others, and finally, patience. Real change doesn't happen overnight. You might see progress in small wins, maybe fewer tantrums, a calmer voice, or the child attempting words instead of hits, but it's a process. The key is repetition and consistency. Every intervention is an investment in their emotional toolkit. I've seen parents transform chaotic mornings into cooperative routines just by combining validation, structured limits, and calm consistency. The child doesn't suddenly become perfect, but the aggression stops being the centerpiece of every interaction. You start to see more cooperation, more problem-solving, and yes, more connection. Because here's the truth. Children don't want to act out forever. They want guidance. They want to be understood. They want someone who can stand firm without becoming part of the storm. And when you provide that, aggression loses its grip. It becomes a signal, not a weapon. And that is where real parenting begins. Now let's be honest. Sometimes aggressive behavior isn't just a phase or a momentary outburst. Most of the time, kids grow out of certain behaviors as they develop emotional skills. But there are situations where the aggression is persistent, intense, or escalating. And that's when it's time to look closer. Signs to watch for include aggression that shows up almost daily, happens in multiple settings, home, school, with friends, and doesn't respond to calm guidance. If the child hurts themselves or others, or seems completely detached from remorse, that's a red flag. These are moments when normal development isn't enough to explain the pattern. Underlying factors can range from anxiety, ADHD, or behavioral disorders, to environmental stressors that the child may not have the language or support to process. And here's the thing. None of this is a failure on your part as a parent. Children's minds are complex, and sometimes professional support is necessary to help them navigate these challenges safely and effectively. Seeking help doesn't mean you weren't paying attention. It means you recognize the difference between manageable behavior and patterns that could become harmful if left unaddressed. Psychologists, counselors, and pediatric specialists can assess underlying causes and provide strategies tailored to your child's needs. Strategies you may not be able to implement alone. But here's the reassuring part. Most children who show intense aggression can learn to manage it with consistent guidance, structure, and support. Intervention doesn't mean punishment. It means equipping them with skills to regulate emotions, communicate needs, and respond appropriately when the bucket overflows. The key takeaway: know the difference between normal developmental challenges and patterns that require professional attention. Trust your instincts. Observe patterns, document triggers, and act before small issues become entrenched. And remember, reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. By doing so, you're giving your child the best chance to grow into someone capable of understanding and managing their emotions, long after the outbursts fade. So, let's wrap this up. Aggression in children isn't about bad kids or failed parenting. It's a signal, a message that something inside is struggling to find an outlet. When you learn to see beyond the outburst, to understand the triggers, validate the emotions, and guide behavior with calm consistency, you stop reacting to chaos and start shaping communication, emotional regulation, and problem-solving skills that last a lifetime. Remember, small daily strategies, acknowledging feelings, creating pause moments, setting consistent boundaries, teaching replacement behaviors, and maintaining structure are what make the difference. And if the aggression seems persistent or extreme, seeking professional guidance is not a failure. It's a tool to help your child navigate challenges safely. I'd love to hear from you. Share your experiences in the comments. What's worked, what hasn't, and I may personally respond. Parenting is messy, but none of us have to go through it alone. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, honest insights into parenting teens and preteens. We're in this together, and trust me, change is possible. One calm, intentional step at a time.